Alright, hi, my name is Michael Breslav, and this is going to be an introduction on using MATLAB to manipulate things like vectors, matrices, and images. So right now I have MATLAB open, and we begin by looking at this large window here, which is the command window. This is basically where we can enter commands to MATLAB and it'll execute them. It's also an interactive mode because we can enter in as many commands as we want and MATLAB will process them and give us some feedback. So first we can start off by just entering in some kind of variable. So let's just say a is equal to 3. And after we press enter, we see that now MATLAB is aware of this variable a, which is storing 3. And we also see that now in our workspace window, there's a new variable which we called a, and it has a value of 3. So now that we have this variable, we can do things such as add to that variable. So for example, we can do a plus 7, and we see that MATLAB calculates that correctly. It gives us the answer of 10. Additionally, we can do something like create another variable, call it b, and say b is equal to a plus 10. And now we see from before that a was equal to 3, and now we've added 10 to it, so that's 13, and b gets the value of 13 here. Now, each time you type an expression like this, you get an answer. But if you don't want the answer to appear in the window, we can use the semicolon. So, for example, if I type in c is equal to 5, we notice that MATLAB is telling us that c is equal to 5. But if we don't want to see that output, we can do something like d is equal to 5 and put a semicolon, and that semicolon stops it from outputting to the screen. Another thing is we may want to clear this whole window. After we end up putting in a lot of expressions, it gets quite cluttered, and we can enter in the command clc to clear the window. So we see now we have this fresh new window that makes it a little easier for us to enter commands into. So right now, so far, we've just seen how to basically create a variable and do some simple operations like addition to it. In this course, we're interested in manipulating vectors, for instance. So to create a vector, we can do something that looks like this. So we start with a variable, let's just call it v for vector, and we're going to use a open square bracket, and then we're going to list the numbers that we want in our vector. So let's say that we want a vector of even numbers, so that would be something like 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, for example. And we can enter that in. Okay, and so now we have this vector. We can do something like size of v, and that tells us it's a 1 by 6 matrix, or in other words, this is a vector that has 1 row and 6 columns. So we see it's actually the vector is actually going horizontally because, like I said, it has 1 row and 6 columns. We could alternatively have entered that vector as a column vector, and it would have looked something like this. Well, to enter a column vector, after each element you would put a semicolon. So 0, semicolon, 2, semicolon, 4, semicolon, 6, semicolon, 8, semicolon, and 10. We don't need a semicolon after the last entry. And then we put a closed square bracket. And now we see that this is a vector that's actually going vertically. And if we do size of v2, which is this vector that we just created, we'll see we get an output of 6, 1, meaning it has 6 rows and 1 column. So it's a vertical vector. So we can really create either one of these vectors whenever we want. So I'm going to clear the screen here. Now let's just say we make 2 vectors. So we can do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can make another vector, call it b, and have it be 3, 2, 1, 0. And we can do operations like a plus b, or really anything, a plus b times 10, for example. So there's a lot of operations that we can really do, but basically this illustrates some of the basic operations that you can do, and you'll be able to play around with that more. One of the things to notice is that you're not going to be able to add 2 vectors that, if one is a horizontal vector and the other is a vertical one, addition on those would not work. So we can see that by if we do something like v2, which we had as the vertical vector from before, and v as the horizontal vector, and we try to add those, we're going to get this error which says matrix dimensions must agree, which basically is a result of the vectors being different types of vectors and not being able to add those. But in general, as long as you're just consistent with either using a horizontal vector or a vertical vector, you aren't going to have any problems like that. So in addition to vectors, that was rather brief, but in addition to vectors, you can also create matrices. So, I mean, in one sense, you can really think of a vector as just being a matrix where one of the dimensions is singular, or just has like a length of 1. And then in the more general case, you have matrices with varied dimensions. So if you want to create or actually we should go back and explain how you can examine one of the entries in a vector. So for example, if we have this vector a from before with 1, 2, 3, or 4, let's say you want to examine what the first element in this vector is. That would be a of 1. MATLAB begins indexing with the number 1. So a of 1 is the first element in the vector a, and we see that that happens to be 1 here. A of 3 is going to be the third element in the vector a, and we see that that gives us 3. So additionally, we can modify a vector by doing this. We can say that a of 3 is equal to 6. And now we see our new vector a is 1, 2, 6, 4. And we notice that the third element in this vector has now changed from 3 to 6. So that's one way of manipulating vectors and accessing their different elements. So going forward, we can talk about matrices, and a matrix we can form by, again, using this square bracket to begin. And now we're going to make a 3 by 3 matrix here. So let's do the identity matrix, which is going to look something like this. 1, 0, 0 for the top row. Now when we want to move to the second row, we need to put a semicolon. And again, we do the second row now, which is going to be 0, 1, 0. Another semicolon for the third row, which is going to be 0, 0, 1. And now we have this matrix. We can see that the first row is 1, 0, 0, second row is 0, 1, 0, and the third row is 0, 0, 1.